The story begins not with a slam dunk, nor with the deafening roar of a packed arena, but with something far quieter, a murmur. In the Dominion Basketball League, where pride, money, and city loyalties collide, the outcome of every game feels sacred. Fans drape themselves in their team's colors, chanting until their throats are raw, believing what they see on the hardwood is pure competition. Yet, in the winter season of 2014, inside the crumbling yet beloved Victory Pavilion in East Harbor, the whispers started. At first, they were nothing more than the idle chatter of long-time season ticket holders. An older fan leaned to another and muttered, "Doesn't it seem like they're missing shots on purpose?" The reply was a chuckle, a dismissal. But as the weeks went on, that same suspicion spread like smoke across a crowded room.
It wasn't just the missed shots, it was the timing of them. Wide-open jumpers clanking off the rim in the closing minutes, a star guard known for ice in his veins suddenly passing up free throws, defensive rotations that broke down in ways that seemed rehearsed. Individually, each play could be chalked up to fatigue, bad luck, or the unpredictable chaos of sport. But when strung together across multiple games, the pattern was too sharp to ignore. Fans began to exchange glances, their cheers faltering mid-game, the sound in the arena shifting from electric confidence to uneasy doubt. Sports writers, the kind who thrived on uncovering juicy narratives, started digging too. One columnist, writing in the East Harbor Ledger, noted that the Ironclads, East Harbor's beloved team, had lost 5 consecutive games in the exact same fashion, a narrow lead squandered in the final minutes. Each loss carried with it a handful of inexplicable plays, like an actor forgetting their lines in the middle of a performance. The writer dared to ask, in careful, coded language, are the Ironclads simply unlucky, or is someone else directing the script? His editor forced him to soften the piece before it went to print, but by then the damage was done. The seed was planted, and it began to grow in the minds of readers. Behind the scenes, coaches exchanged hushed words in locker rooms after players had gone home. Referees, too, noticed things that felt off. The most kept silent, unwilling to cross whatever invisible line hovered over the league. And still, the whispers thickened. It wasn't proof yet, but it was enough to make every missed basket sting differently, every turnover feel like something more than a mistake. For a league built on trust between fans and players, the foundation had begun to crack. The danger of whispers is that they spread faster than truth, and once they take hold, they can twist every sound and sight. In East Harbor, they weren't just questioning the Ironclads anymore. They were questioning the very soul of the game itself. And somewhere, beneath the chants and the sneakers squeaking against the hardwood, someone was making sure those whispers would never die. And soon, the murmurs were about to find a face, a player whose life would become tangled in those shadows. His name was Damon Cross, and to East Harbor, he was more than a basketball player. He was a savior in sneakers, the kind of athlete who carried a struggling city's pride on his shoulders every time he stepped onto the court. Standing 6'4", with a quick crossover and a jumper as smooth as ocean waves, Damon had been the Ironclads' hometown hero since his debut 3 seasons earlier. The fans loved him not just for the points he scored, but for the way he seemed to represent them. Gritty, resilient, unshakable. But what the roaring crowds never saw was the weight Damon carried off the hardwood, the secrets that made him a perfect target when the wrong people came looking. Damon's family had been drowning in debt long before he signed his first professional contract. His father's small auto shop had collapsed under unpaid loans, and his younger brother had been pulled into dangerous circles, owing money to street-level bookmakers who rarely forgave late payments. Damon's rookie salary helped, but the deeper he dug to save his family, the more the debts seemed to multiply, as if the numbers themselves were conspiring against him. Behind closed doors, he was not the unshakable Ironclad the fans adored, but a man haunted by deadlines, bills, and the quiet knowledge that no matter how many points he scored, his family could never outrun the shadows that had latched onto them. It was during that vulnerable stretch that Damon first noticed the man who never cheered, never clapped, and never once took his eyes off him during games. He was always there, 3 rows behind the bench, sharp suit, slicked back hair, expressionless as stone. Damon didn't know his name at first, but he could feel the weight of his gaze pressing into him from the crowd. Eventually, that man found a way into Damon's life, not through threats, but through an offer disguised as kindness. "You don't have to lose everything," he told Damon one night outside the arena. "You just have to miss a few shots." At first, Damon laughed it off, but the words stuck. The man didn't need to remind him of his family's situation. He knew. He also knew that no matter how fast he ran on the court, he couldn't outrun the debts circling his family like vultures. And so, the seed was planted. A poisonous one, but wrapped in logic Damon could almost convince himself to believe. If a missed shot here or there meant his brother stayed alive, wasn't that worth the risk?
But point shaving is never as simple as a single missed jumper. Once you let the door open, you don't get to choose when to close it. Damon tried to convince himself it would end after one game, one fourth-quarter collapse. But the men in suits weren't interested in one game. They wanted control of the whole season. And Damon, for all his skill, had already given them their first foothold. The whispers in the stands had found their center. What no one realized yet was that Damon's struggle wasn't just about games lost or won. It was about survival. And soon, the scoreboard itself would begin to betray him. At first, the manipulation was subtle. A free throw missed here, a pass that sailed just a little too high there. The kind of mistakes that could be explained away by fatigue, nerves, or the unpredictable rhythm of the game. Damon Cross told himself that as long as no one could see the strings, he could keep his family safe. But the scoreboard does not lie, and over time, even the smallest irregularities began to form a picture too sharp to ignore. In January, the Ironclads lost a double overtime thriller to the Baymont Titans, a game where Damon, usually automatic from the line, missed 4 free throws in the final 2 minutes. 2 weeks later against the Riverton Hawks, he turned the ball over on consecutive possessions while his team was clinging to a narrow lead. Each loss seemed different on the surface, but in the quiet rooms where analysts reviewed tape, a disturbing similarity emerged. Damon was always at the center of the collapse. Sports gamblers, sharp-eyed and quick to notice trends, were the first to recognize the pattern. Oddsmakers began to adjust their lines, favoring the Ironclads in ways that seemed reckless, yet somehow those betting against them won more often than not. Fans who had wagered small sums noticed it too, and whispers on sports forums grew into angry rants. How do you blow that lead? How do you miss that shot? It doesn't make sense. Slowly, the conversation shifted from bad luck to deliberate sabotage. But it wasn't just the gamblers watching. Inside the Dominion Basketball League offices, a handful of investigators began quietly charting the Ironclads' games. They drew lines between turnovers, missed shots, and betting spikes, creating maps of moments where chance seemed too deliberate. To them, it looked less like basketball and more like choreography, mistakes timed so precisely that the only explanation was intent. Still, the league hesitated. Scandals could destroy reputations, and without proof, suspicion was dangerous. So they watched, silently, hoping the pattern would fade. For Damon, every game became a tightrope. He lived in 2 worlds, the adoration of the crowd, chanting his name, and the cold stare of the men who demanded he keep playing his part. If he refused, his family would pay. If he complied, his career and legacy would crumble piece by piece. He convinced himself he could control it, that he could disguise his errors just enough to avoid detection. But the truth was darker. The more he shaved points, the easier it became to spot the script. By March, fans no longer trusted what they were seeing. Even when Damon played clean, every missed basket felt suspicious, every turnover an omen. The Ironclads arena, once a sanctuary of thunderous cheers, was now filled with murmurs of doubt. And somewhere in the shadows, the men pulling Damon's strings watched with satisfaction as the game bent to their will. The scoreboard had become a silent witness, flashing numbers that told a story no one wanted to believe. And as those numbers piled up, the whispers turned into questions. Questions that would soon lead investigators toward the hidden hand guiding every outcome. The Dominion Basketball League thrived on spectacle, the flashing lights, the thundering crowds, the illusion of unpredictability. But beneath the banners and highlight reels, there was a shadow network few dared to speak of. Those who knew simply called it the Syndicate. It was not an official name, not written down in any ledger, but whispered like a curse by those who understood that the game's biggest battles were sometimes fought far from the court. The man Damon first noticed 3 rows behind the bench, his name was Victor Kroll. To the public, he was a polished investor, a quiet philanthropist with ties to East Harbor charities. But in truth, Kroll was the Syndicate's frontman, the kind of figure who never raised his voice, yet never had to. He specialized in finding cracks in the lives of athletes, debts, addictions, secret families, gambling habits. Where the public saw heroes, Kroll saw vulnerabilities, and with patience, he turned them into assets. Damon was just the latest in a long line of players caught in his net. The Syndicate's goal wasn't to ruin games outright. Chaos was too obvious. Their genius was subtlety, shaving points, controlling spreads, steering outcomes in ways that looked natural to casual fans but delivered millions to the right bettors. A missed free throw here, a foul at the wrong moment there, a sudden turnover when the stakes were highest. Each move was calculated, designed to nudge games without shattering the illusion of fair play. The Syndicate's fingerprints were everywhere, but invisible unless you knew exactly where to look. Damon had convinced himself he could stay invisible too, that his mistakes would blend into the chaos of competition. But Kroll's reach stretched further than he imagined. It wasn't just Damon under their control. A backup center from Riverton, a referee with mounting medical bills, even a coach rumored to be too deep with gambling debts. All were quietly on the Syndicate's leash. Damon wasn't part of a single scheme. He was part of a machine, each cog turning smoothly to manipulate outcomes across the league.
One night, after a narrow loss to the Port Mason Crushers, Damon found himself cornered in the parking lot by Kroll himself. The man's voice was calm, his words precise. "You think this ends when you've paid your brother's debt? No, Damon. This ends when we say it ends." That was the moment Damon understood the trap. He wasn't saving his family anymore. He was shackled, bound to men who thrived on silence and fear. Meanwhile,
Whispers reached the ears of league investigators who were beginning to piece together the syndicate's reach. But with every lead, they found doors closed, witnesses silenced, evidence vanishing before it could be collected. It was as if the game itself was protecting its hidden masters. The syndicate operated like ghosts, unseen but ever-present. And Damon realized that every time he stepped onto the court, he wasn't playing for East Harbor anymore. He was playing for them. The crowd still chanted his name, but to Damon, their voices now sounded hollow, echoes in an arena where he no longer controlled his fate. And just as he began to contemplate breaking free, the syndicate prepared to make one final demand, a demand that would shake not only Damon's career, but the entire Dominion League to its core. The night of the Dominion League semifinals was supposed to be Damon Cross's redemption. The Ironclads had clawed their way through a bruising season, battered by rumors and haunted by collapses, yet here they were, one step from the championship. The city of East Harbor surged with hope. Fans painted their faces, flags waved from cars, and inside Victory Pavilion, the roar was so deafening it rattled the rafters. To everyone else, it was a night of destiny. To Damon, it felt like a funeral march. In the locker room before tip-off, Damon sat alone at his stall, staring at the laces of his shoes. His teammates slapped backs, barked encouragement, but Damon barely heard them. He knew what was coming. Hours earlier, a single text arrived on his phone. No name, no threat, just 4 words. Fourth quarter. Miss big. It was the syndicate's final demand. This wasn't about spreads anymore. This was about the whole game. Damon was expected to collapse under the spotlight, to let the Ironclads fall in front of their home crowd. And if he refused, he didn't dare imagine the consequences. The first 3 quarters blurred into noise and sweat. Damon played clean, almost too clean, burying jumpers, attacking the rim, feeding his teammates. The Ironclads built a lead, and for a moment, he let himself believe he could break free, that maybe the syndicate would see the futility and back off. But as the fourth quarter began, he caught sight of Victor Krull in the crowd, stone-faced, seated 3 rows behind the bench. That stare was enough to remind him. Escape wasn't part of the plan. The quarter unraveled like a nightmare. Damon bricked open shots. He slipped on drives that seemed unguarded. A careless pass sailed out of bounds. Another fumbled into the opponent's hands. The crowd's cheers cracked into confusion, then frustration, then anger. Chants of his name turned to jeers. Each mistake was a dagger, not just in the Ironclad's hopes, but in Damon's soul. By the final buzzer, East Harbor's dream was dead, and Damon Cross stood at center court, head bowed, as boos rained down like thunder. But the real storm came afterward. The very next morning, an anonymous report landed on the desk of a Dominion League investigator. It detailed unusual betting spikes, patterns stretching across the season, names whispered in connection with Krull. The syndicate's ghostly grip had finally left fingerprints. Yet before the investigation could reach daylight, files vanished, witnesses retracted, and the report itself was buried under layers of bureaucracy. The League quietly issued a statement blaming the Ironclad's collapse on poor execution, and the whispers were smothered once again. Damon Cross faded from the League the following season. Officially, it was injuries, but those who had watched closely knew better. Some said he left the country. Others claimed he vanished entirely. The syndicate was never named, never charged, never even acknowledged. And yet the echoes remained, in the way fans eyed the scoreboard with suspicion, in the way every missed shot carried the faint taste of doubt. In East Harbor, they still tell the story of that semifinal, how their hero seemed to crumble under the weight of the moment. But for those who listen closely, in the silence after the final buzzer, another truth whispers back. Some games aren't lost on the court at all. They're stolen in the shadows, and the scoreboard remembers long after the players are gone.